Everybody's dying! Panic! Quick! Get out the windows! Do whatever you can! Just survive! Well, is that not a good intro? Alright, sorry. Got carried away there. Luckily, no one's watching yet. Anyway, so let's get rid of this. What? That's my accent. This is how I talk every day, every moment of the day. Now, welcome to this amazing thing. I'm going to be going till 11:15. I don't care if I have to fall asleep or what. This is going to keep going for an hour and a half. Right, lads, we got one person here, probably a YouTube bot, just checking me out. We are going to start off with, of course, coronavirus. But we're not going to be looking at the coronavirus just yet. We are going to be looking at, can I calm down? We are going to be looking at polio, smallpox, the history of these plagues that have plagued us for ages. And where did they start? Of course you're asking that. So, I'll get rid of the stupid voice now. So, I think you can see there the screen. Right. Now, let's start. Well, I've forgotten. So, let's just start here and you'll see.
Unlocking the mysteries of how viruses operate are modern discoveries. But smallpox is an ancient menace. This microscopic life form has been terrorizing mankind since the beginning of civilization. No one knows when smallpox makes its first appearance on the stage of human history. It begins as an animal virus somewhere in Africa, the Middle East, or the Asian subcontinent. At some point, the virus makes the jump to the human population.
We estimate we'd have to have hundreds of thousands of people before it could keep going. So we assume the spread to the human population did not occur until after the first agricultural settlements, maybe 10,000 years ago.
So there we go. There's your answer. Well, potential answer. The cause of all diseases, or the jumping over from diseases, couldn't have happened before you had large populations, which happened to coincide with the introduction of agriculture and farming. So is it possible that when we began to come away from nature and just walking around picking fruit off trees, when we started to manipulate nature, it had some side effects? Hello? Possibly? Yeah? Even likely. Okay. Oh, feedback. So I don't think we need to listen to too much more of this, but we'll see.
The smallpox virus follows the population as it migrates.
There you go.
It spreads slowly throughout the bird.
So then let's have a look at this. Now listen up, all right?
3. Colonial British officers stationed near Fort Pitt, Pennsylvania, faced natives. Sir Geoffrey Amherst, Commander-in-Chief of the British forces in America, suggests a new weapon to battle the contentious Indians in a letter to another colonel.
Could it not be contrived to send the smallpox among these disaffected tribes of Indians? We must on this occasion use every stratagem in our power to reduce them.
Nice guy. But do you think he was the first person who come up with this idea? Well, whether it was by accident or not, when the Spanish went over to South America, box with them, and that got rid of the Mayan Incans, and because they had absolutely no immunity to it whatsoever. Now, we're going to find out what cured it.
The dairy maids working on his farm could nurse smallpox victims with no fear of contagion.
Dairy maids.
Milkmaids would
cowpox, which is a related disease, sort of a first cousin to smallpox. And they would get mildly ill. They would break out in sores, usually on their hands, and then they would be fine. Milkmaids never got smallpox. For some reason or other, getting cowpox gave them immunity.
So milkmaids saved us. But yes, this guy here you're looking at with his finger on his temple. Thinking about it. Yes, they did a very good job in getting all around the place and eradicating smallpox. But did they eradicate it completely? Because haven't we got rather similar diseases? What about acne? Actually, acne is bacterial, so that's a load of rubbish. Don't listen to him. Me. So, the thing is, have we got rid of it? Now, let's move on to polio. Polio, because there's another one. It's all these diseases, you see, that have come around since we started meddling with nature. Is it this one? We'll go to that one in a minute. Now listen up.
When you scrubbed your hands, you had a very good chance of picking it up from the sewage system. It was that prevalent. Normally, the virus would just head in past your teeth, head south, and as it went through your bowel, which would take it a few days, a couple of weeks, it would induce immunity against itself in the wall of the gut on its way through. By the time it had been cleared from the bottom end, again, I'm putting that very delicately, you were immune against that particular type of poliovirus. So if you miss it again...
So there you go. You could be then, if you were symptom-free, which 95% of people were, you would be absolutely fine. And it just made me think, actually, perhaps it was people who weren't, their digestive system wasn't moving properly, it would get stuck in there, and maybe that would why some people would get more problem than others. But as we're just about to find out, you'd have to be pretty young. So this guy's just said here that Franklin Delano Roosevelt probably didn't have polio because his disease was symmetrical, and polio tends to not be symmetrical. So you get it on like more on one side than the other.
Commonly, polio affects children, particularly children who are less than 6 months of age. Contracting polio when he's 39 is not very likely. And second of all, polio causes something called asymmetric paralysis. Asymmetric paralysis. The muscles are damaged.
But I thought the point there that it was mainly only children under 6 months who were having an effect. We'll play a bit of this. I might skip a bit.
A random process. So having both legs damaged equally is unlikely.
It goes on about that.
The provide energy to the muscles. Now, not everybody who contracts polio has this degradative damage to their motor neurons. In fact, 90 to 95% of people who are acutely infected are asymptomatic, so they don't have any symptoms.
Don't have any symptoms ever. They're perfectly all right. It's not that they lose a leg but they didn't get any symptoms. No, losing a leg would be getting a symptom, right? So 90 to 95% of people got absolutely nothing from it. Now, this is the point I want to make here. Now, let's just carry on.
Whereas about 5 to 10% of people get only mild symptoms. Mild symptoms. So what are the mild symptoms? Well, these are symptoms that you generally see or can see with any virus. You might get fever, headache, fatigue.
So any virus. So can we say that, you know, when they say they've eradicated smallpox, isn't smallpox just one of the members of the family of viruses that affect us, that have symptoms like fever, and we'll hear in a minute, achy joints, blah, 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 blah. But the viruses differ on how they think. So they say, oh, we eradicate polio, but now we've got MS.
So this is really from your immune system trying to thwart the virus, trying to fight it off. A patient might also have some throat pain, and this is due to replication in the throat. The patient may also experience abdominal pain, stomach pain, or nausea or vomiting, and that's from the replication that occurs in the intestines. Patients that have these mouth symptoms generally recover and don't experience the muscle weakness. In fact, only about 0.5% of people who are infected acutely by the virus experience muscle symptoms. And these muscle symptoms may include weakness.
Now, that's still quite a lot. 0.5% of the world would be a lot of people. But if you've got a disease that affects a small number of people, surely that would make it easier to look at those people and think, why has it affected them and not others? Was it certain conditions when they picked it up? Blah, 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 blah. I think that's how you should get to the source of the problem, and therefore you can fix it. Maybe it was lacking something, lacking a vitamin or whatever, right? Or sunlight or whatever. Or, the bowel movements were stuck, constipation, something like that. Rather than say, right, let's develop a vaccine, and which is basically some way of teaching people's immune system to deal with it. That seems to be the basic thing behind all vaccines. That we can give to the whole world and then nobody will get polio. But the virus will adapt in some time, maybe 30, 50 years. And as we find out now, it's only in 1979 when they finally got rid of it. So sometime later, something else comes out, and it could come out in a different form, and they'll call it something else. And therefore, they'll still say, we eradicated polio, and we'll continue to try and give people the polio vaccine. But now there's this other thing called MS, and we don't know how to deal with that. And it'll be sort of, going through the whole motions again. Right? But what I want to get into is this potential of using a biological weapon. And that I think is disgusting, but I think it's absolutely what is going to happen when you've got I've always quite liked Trump because at least he comes out and says what he thinks, but yeah, I kind of wouldn't put it past him to use a biological weapon. And to use it, say Corona, say if it's a biological weapon, Trump uses it on his enemies, but they like to have a threefold sort of, it's not just good for this, but it's good for something else. Now the economy's struggling, and this coronavirus seems to be hardly affecting kids at all. Totally the opposite, polio and smallpox. Talk a bit more about that in a minute. But it's taken out the oldies and people with underlying conditions as well, and that is brilliant for the economy. And it may sound bad to say it, but someone in a position who's, say, pretend you're the president, and you've got these economic problems, and you're pretty ruthless. He's old himself, but say someone who's 75 is looking in the face of death anyway, right? They can limp on for another few years, or they could die. It's not going to make a massive amount of difference. Whether you're grandparent or parent or yourself, whether you die at 75 or 78, it's not a huge amount of difference. But to economies on scale, them dying a few years earlier is a massive boost to the economy. Or them living longer and more dependent on stuff is probably, I suppose they're using loads of medicines, so that's good for Big Pharma anyway. So, yeah, Corona, biological weapon, right. Have we got anything else on here? I see this one bot is watching me. It must be a bot. It hasn't said hello, so I don't think it's a person. That's all right. Is there anything else that's going to show you? We'll talk about smallpox. I mean, I'm not sure, like, there's truth about smallpox. I mean, they were saying that for quite a while from like the 15th century, 16th, 17th, 18th, that if you lived to adulthood, you would have had smallpox. You would have had and survived smallpox. And they said the only people who survived it would have been riddled with pot marks all over their face and scarred faces for life. I don't know. So I find that a bit hard to believe, really. That could possibly be true. I think I wore myself out in that first minute. Well, there you go. I did do my bit of research, trying to bring you the truth. Right. What I did want to take the piss out of the BBC, so we're gonna go over to the BBC because I don't listen to them anymore. But News at 10 probably was one of their best programs. So. And when I did this earlier, picked up quite. You're just going to listen to the BBC and take the piss.
In Italy, 148 people are now believed to have died, of the rise of nearly 40% since yesterday. The number of cases has also risen by nearly a third to about 3,300. France, too, has reported a surge in its confirmed cases to 423.
There you go, they probably got about 2 million incubating them. Bear in mind, it's like a flu, it's like a cold. It's not that massive.
The court also said allegations of physical abuse have been proven and overruled the Sheikh's efforts to keep the findings secret. Here's our security correspondent, Frank Gardner.
This is a quite extraordinary and unusual set of judgments found against the ruler of a close British ally and a friend of the Queen. Sheikh Mohammed Al Maktoum, the billionaire ruler of Dubai and founder of Godolphin Stables, has been found in a high court to have abducted and forcibly returned 2 of his daughters, subjecting one of them to serious physical abuse. He is also found to have orchestrated a campaign of intimidation against his former wife, Princess Haya of Jordan, who had an adulterous affair with her British bodyguard. Sheikh Mohammed appealed unsuccessfully to keep these judgments out of the public domain. In a statement issued afterwards, he said that appeal was made to protect the best interests of his children, that the judgment only told one side of the story, and he asked for the media to respect the privacy of his children.
The government says it's working urgently with airlines to save regional routes, which were operated before it went into administration. Most of the company's 2,400 employees have been made redundant, and passengers with tickets were told not to go to the airport. The government said it did all it could to save Flybe, which has been struggling for some time. But Brian Strutton from the pilots' union BALPA accused ministers of going back on promises they made earlier this year to help.
The Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Secretary of State for Business and for Transport all came out saying Flybe is fine, we're going to put a package together, a deal together for them. That didn't materialise. Government seems to have done a U-turn on that commitment and has walked away from the Flybe airline and the workforce, and that's why it went into administration. It's a terrible, terrible shame.
The United States has denounced the International Criminal Court's decision to authorize an investigation into alleged war crimes by U.S. military personnel in Afghanistan. The inquiry will look into allegations of rape and torture dating back to 2003 and 2004. The Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan have agreed a ceasefire in the Syrian province of Idlib. The 2 men who have been hostile announced new measures to try to ease tensions in the region. Last week, more than 30 Turkish soldiers were killed during a Syrian government offensive backed by Russia to regain the rebel-held province. Our correspondent Paul Adams has more.
After talks which lasted 6 hours, Vladimir Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan have agreed the terms of a ceasefire to come into effect at midnight tonight. The 2 leaders have agreed to create a security corridor 6 kilometers either side of the strategic M4 motorway, which cuts Idlib province in 2. After 10 days, Turkish and Russian soldiers will start to patrol there. This means the Syrian army will remain in control of the entire south of the province. But the two presidents said displaced civilians should be allowed to return to their homes. They also pledged to fight terrorism and stop the targeting of civilians. If this deal sticks, it could bring a measure of relief to upwards of 1 million people displaced since the beginning of December.
The American Senator Elizabeth Warren has dropped out of the race for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. She performed poorly in the Super Tuesday primaries, failing to win her own state of Massachusetts. The contest to take on Donald Trump in November's election is now clearly between Bernie Sanders and the former Vice President Joe Biden. Speaking to reporters in Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren said she had no regrets about running.
This has been the honor of a lifetime. 10 years ago, I was teaching a few blocks from here and talking about what was broken in America. And
No chance of a woman president then?
And pretty much nobody wanted to hear it. And I've had a chance to get out there and talk with millions of people.
They always have
The Duke
their
and Duchess of Sussex
votes
are
on an
carrying out
even
their first
year,
public event
which is
together
when men
since
are up.
announcing they were stepping back from their royal duties. The couple are attending an awards ceremony in London, which honours the achievements of wounded, sick and injured service personnel.
Neil, thank you very much. Have a good evening. You're listening to The World Tonight. I'm Sean Lay.
I'm making this video because it could be the last video I make. Yeah.
My battery's running out.
Pretty soon I'm going to be leaving somehow. And I'm not so sure of the outcome, but I'm 99% positive it will work.
Where's she going?
And if it doesn't, then they can help me because all my father cares about is his reputation.
That's Latifah, a strange daughter of Sheikh Mohammed, the ruler of Dubai, using a video message posted on the internet in 2018 to explain why she was making her third attempt to leave. She failed after Indian special forces boarded her boat as it made for international waters. A judge in London today concluded that the cooperation of the Indian military in that operation to capture Latifah demonstrated Sheikh Mohammed and the UAE's significant international respect and influence.
That'd be a good film.
The
Catching
Latifah
Latifah.
disrupt the police investigation into the kidnapping of another daughter, this time in England, in order to protect Britain's relations with the ruler of Dubai. That question isn't answered by Sir Andrew McFarlane, the most senior judge presiding in family courts in England and Wales, but in what's called a finding of fact, Sir Andrew explained the circumstances which have prompted Princess Haya, Sheikh Mohammed's sixth wife, to challenge her husband's application for contact with their two children. In his judgment, Sir Andrew said she was worried because two of the Sheikh's daughters had disappeared. Shamsa was abducted in Cambridge when she was 19, almost 20 years ago now, and hasn't been seen in public since. An email sent by one of her sisters, but said to be from Shamsa, describes being grabbed by 4 armed men, driven to her father's home in Newmarket, drugged, and flown by helicopter and plane to Dubai. Well, our security correspondent, Frank Gardner, is with me. Frank, you sat in on a lot of the hearing. We're only getting the judgment now because an application by the Sheikh to keep it confidential was rejected by the court.
He's got a
Why is he so keen that these matters shouldn't be made public?
Well, soon after the judgment was made public, a statement was issued in his name, in Sheikh Mohammed's name, saying that the reason why he wanted to keep it secret was that it was not in the best interest of their children. So what we haven't mentioned there is the 2 underage children of Princess Haya and Sheikh Mohammed, who are currently in Britain. When she fled Dubai last year, in April, she brought them with her. And he said it's not in their interest, and he's called on the notoriously intrusive UK media to leave them alone. And he said that, look, you're only getting one side of the judgment, because he himself, as a head of state, couldn't appear in court. So he said the judgment is one-sided. Now, the court is certainly the sort of historic attitude of the court was not particularly sympathetic to the fact that Sheikh Mohammed was not represented in person, because she was there. Princess Haya, she turned up every day. She listened intently to everything that was being said and argued both for and against.
Did his side then provide no information to the judge? I mean,
oh no, they did.
So when he says it's a one-sided judgment, what he's saying is the judge has reached a conclusion that backs her version, and he is not happy about that. He's not saying that the court didn't know what the alternative argument of the case was.
I think you've absolutely nailed that exactly right. Yes, I mean, this is a very high-profile case that's been going on for 8 months. Absolutely top lawyers, Britain's top barristers, have been arguing this case, highly paid for both sides. And very convincing arguments were made on both sides, but in the end, court, the family court and the Court of Appeal has come down on the side of the princess. Now, just for the sake of balance here, let's just put this in perspective. She, the court heard, was told, began an adulterous affair with her British bodyguard sometime around 2018. She started getting very intimidating signs, signals from agents of the Sheikh. At one point, in fact, on 2 occasions, a gun was placed on her pillow in her room in Dubai with the safety catch off. On another occasion, a helicopter was landed right in front of her dwelling, and the pilots said, "I'm here to take one person to Awir." Awir, I've lived in Dubai, and I know what Awir is. Awir is where a desert prison.
They make suggestive comments.
And that really frightened her. So she fled.
Someone put a loaded gun on my
having
pillow.
already now discovered what she realised was the truth about what had happened to these 2 abducted
I got a loaded gun and do what I like with
and
it.
interestingly, Sheikh Mohammed doesn't deny that he's brought those princesses back, but he says
It's
that
different,
his
he's put a
version
pot
is,
of pills
rather than
there,
them being
said,
abducted,
"Eat me."
was that they were being rescued and sort of essentially rescued from extortion in one case and just from needing mental help in another.
Can I ask you one final question? How potentially damaging
I only
is
need
the
these if
relations
someone
between
comments.
Dubai and Britain? And given that there's been question marks raised by the lawyers on the mother's side of kind of the Foreign Office having some kind of role in encouraging there to be a backing off of police investigations and all the rest of it, damaging, but also damaging to our government as well as to Dubai.
The Foreign Office doesn't come out of this with shining colours, that's for sure, because Sheikha Shamsa was abducted in broad daylight from Cambridge in August 2000. That is fact. That's established by the court. And Cambridgeshire police tried to start an investigation into this. They made an application to go to Dubai, for a detective to go there, interview her. That was refused by Dubai, and they didn't get any help from the Foreign Office at all on this. Britain has very close relations with the UAE government, including Dubai. There's an airbase there, Minhat, I've been there, David Cameron's been there, RAF, tornadoes, typhoons, and supply planes go in and out of there. Wow. And of course, the UAE is a major trading partner and partner in terms of anti-corruption. There are customs agents stationed there, and it's an ally against Iran. So it's not in Britain's strategic interest for there to be a row. So I think the Foreign Office will be hoping that this whole business goes away and that you and I don't continue this conversation.
Well, at that point, nothing to do with the Foreign Office, Frank Gardner. Thank you very much. But we will stay with this story and the implications of it, because Latifah, the daughter you heard speaking in that video, she said, is represented by lawyer David Hay. Having had a grim experience of his own in custody in Dubai, he campaigns now for the rights of foreigners held there. Earlier, he told me about the significance he sees in this judgment.
Over 2 years ago that we were speaking with Latifah during her escape attempt, and it's 2 years ago yesterday that the boat that she was on was attacked. And then she was taken, and she hasn't been seen in public since then.
What's the importance of today's judgment in the family court?
I mean, the judgment is very important for lots of reasons, but what it does do is it shines a light on some of the questions that you've answered. It shows us essentially what happened to Latifah, that she's effectively in, for want of a better phrase, a prison. And it gives us a lot of information of what happened from the last time that we had contact with her.
Say hello.
But the judgment itself is
human here.
It validates everything Latifah said.
Commenting on the news at the moment. We'll be here till 11:15, all right?
Shamsa, almost
say hello.
A decade ago, was similarly kidnapped, but this time from the streets of the
UK
gone by her father. Now it's referred to in the judgment.
Get out of here,
a very serious accusation. So that's it's very, very important for us. But what's equally for us is that about 3 weeks ago, Tina, Latifah's friend, and myself, we were at the United Nations in Geneva, where we were representing Latifah's case to the nation's working group on enforced disappearances.
No one wants to do that, only one.
Very important for them because they've been investigating Latifah's whereabouts for about 2 years, and now we can actually give them the judgment and show them that Latifah was kidnapped. And you've had your judge in England conclude that.
Latifah
trial process.
What other news program would you get that?
in legal jargon as a statement of fact set out by the judge. So in other words, the judge is saying, these are no longer allegations. I am satisfied that these are the circumstances which applied in these cases, and therefore that provides the background for his estranged wife, the Sheikh, to say, look, I don't want my children to have contact with
such
their
a wide
father
angle.
because I believe their fate may be the fate of their older half-sister.
Correct. I mean, when you look at it, it's an unprecedented finding. It's a finding that effectively the ruler of an emirate and a very senior member of that country's government essentially kidnapped two of his daughters, one of them from the streets of England, and meted out extensive abuse and intimidation to his most recent ex-wife, who was in England. And these are findings of fact by the most senior family court judge in England. It's very significant.
Which raises the question then whether you will now be pressing for the police to reopen the investigation into what happened in Cambridge almost 20 years ago, when the older daughter Shamsa disappeared.
Me and the bot.
And also,
hey, bot.
Presumably questioning why the Foreign Office hasn't been more open about its relations with the Sheikh and whether or not it intervened in this police investigatory process.
Because they don't want to do the washing in public.
So many questions now, particularly obviously from the 2000 kidnap of Sheikh Shamsa from the streets of England, which was, for want of a better phrase, essentially covered up by the Foreign Office, and that's again quite heavily detailed. All the circumstances around that in the judgment. So that's something that's very, very important. Now, last year we tried to get the Cambridge police to reopen the investigation. We took Latifah's video, which lots of people have seen, the transcript of that, which is essentially eyewitness evidence to what happened to her sister. And we also had one of Latifah's cousins, Marcus Zafari, who was also Shamsa's cousin, who gave evidence to the Cambridge police. So we've given them a lot of new evidence. And
this definitely
will be met with force.
At 12:01 tonight, as in from midnight on, the
BBC broadcast everything.
During this process, Turkey reserves the right to retaliate with all its strength anywhere against any attack that might be conducted by the regime.
Speaking alongside him, Vladimir Putin, who of course is working with the Syrian regime, expressed optimism that the agreement would bring much needed peace.
Turkey only went into Idlib because they're told by America and UK to do it.
De-escalation zone and will end the suffering of the civilian population.
They shouldn't even been
and the
there.
growth of the humanitarian crisis.
Give the
Moscow correspondent Steve Rosenberg has this
Kurds
assessment now of what the talks.
their own country.
After these talks, these
Give them a bit of Turkey, a bit of Syria,
came
and a
out
bit of
and
Iraq.
said they had agreed a
Make sure they got some
ceasefire in Idlib
resources.
from just after midnight tonight.
Talk to your uncle.
Also, a security
From the
corridor
millions
and,
of refugees
joint
everywhere.
Russian-Turkish patrols. At least one big Turkish demand, important Turkish demand, was clearly not met.
This is a winning
because
format.
Turkey had wanted Syrian government
Hello, you
forces
back? You the
to
bot?
pull out of
Say
those
hello
areas
if you want.
which they've recently seized. In and
Checking
around
out the
Idlib.
news for a bit.
There was no mention of that. And that is all. Now, will this be a lasting agreement? Will this bring peace to that area? It's too early to say. We've seen many agreements and deals and compromises in the last few years, which have ended up being temporary. They've eventually unraveled.
Well, I wonder why.
There's no
Everyone
guarantee
wants
that
them
this
to
one
stick
is going to last
in
either.
the West.
Some kind of agreement and compromise had been expected because President Putin and Erdogan have in the past gone into enclosed rooms and come out with compromises. Both countries believe they benefit from a continuing cooperation.
It's all theatre.
So they've come up with this agreement.
All this Russia,
Previous
Turkey.
agreements have fallen apart.
It's theatre.
And there's no guarantee that this one will be lasting. That was Steve Rosenberg reporting from Moscow. A quick reminder, if you want to listen back to any of this program or to previous programs, go to our website. You can also download the podcast from there. Right, you're listening to The World Tonight with me, Sean Lay. The headline so far this evening: a woman who was diagnosed with coronavirus last night has died. The first death in the UK. It's understood she was in her 70s and had existing health conditions.
If they report every flu death,
The ruler of Dubai abducted two of his children.
our thoughts should be with their families, right?
Intimidated his wife. And the US Senator Elizabeth Warren has pulled out of the race for the Democratic presidential nomination to face Donald Trump in November, but says she won't yet endorse any of her remaining. Now, we already knew that the Six Nations rugby fixture between Italy and Ireland in Dublin this weekend was off. Now, both the men and women's matches between England and Italy, due to be played in Rome later this month, have been cancelled. The announcement became inevitable after the Italian government ruled that all sporting events had to be played behind closed doors as the country tries to halt the spread of the virus. Italy is the worst hit European country so far, with more than 3,000 cases reported. With cases in the UK steadily rising, it raises the question of how soon the sports authorities here may have to follow suit.
400 was about 1 million. 3,000 would be about. That's probably got to be
music, which accompanies the pre-match
20
handshake
odd
ahead
million.
of every Premier League game, is a ritual that won't take place until
with it incubating in
fears that physical contact risks spreading the virus. Yesterday, the government asked the league to step up its contingency planning. Today, by chance, many of the leading figures in the administration of the game were in London for a summit on business and football. David Davis, former chief executive of the Football Association, was there. I asked him how much coronavirus was the topic of conversation.
Well, it's very much the topic.
I can't stand the sport, I'm afraid. Like, it just bores the crap out of me. Let's just see what they're saying on... Actually, just turn it off for a bit. Let's turn it off a bit. We have 20 minutes of news. That is boring. Right, I thought when it showed me one person that it was a bot. An algorithm just checking on what I'm saying. But it went away and then came back. So you could be a real person. But no one's saying hello. I mean, I'm trying it. I'm trying to do my best on my own, but... You know what I mean? Trying to build an audience here. So people have to say something. I can't say it for you. I've tried all that picking up on the the feeling that I'm getting and trying to telepathize. It doesn't always work. I'm going to show you my forehead. You can see my forehead because that's speaking to you as well. It's talking to you. You see what's written on my mind along here. Okay, we've got 2 people in there. Say hello. Let's chat. It's not awkward at all. Really? I'm a little bit nervous. Let's like this. I gave up cannabis for Lent. And it lasted about a week. So I failed. I was being like, I usually got chocolate or coffee or something. I was just being a little bit too what's the word? Anyway, when I run out, I'm gonna give up for a week again. Oh, it's off again. I'm gonna try not to look at that. I'm gonna stay until 11:15. You wanna do some meditating? We could watch one of these docs, actually. Let's watch one of these, one of the things I looked at a bit longer. Let's give you some of this. What did I find interesting? Try that one. Nice little simple history. While I rest my voice. So it's using up all my bandwidth.
It starts with a breath. The virus lodges in the mouth and throat, makes its way to the lymph nodes, and begins to migrate from cell to cell. 12 days later, it's in the bloodstream, multiplying in the bone marrow and spleen. Symptoms appear: high fever, muscle pain, headache, and weakness.
Typical of all viruses.
In the mouth and throat, rupturing, releasing virus into the saliva. Next, it attacks the skin. A rash forms, then fluid-filled blisters.
Yeah, I want to say about skin diseases. So obviously, if you've got anything on your skin, it is an indication of something else going on underneath.
But even acne, even though it is bacterial based, is an indication that something ain't right underneath. And when they had it in Egypt, they believed it was due to people lying. If you have been lying, you'd get acne. And, at least in those days, they tried to look at the cause. Whereas these days, all they do is, they try thing after thing after thing, treating the symptoms and seeing if it works. It's much better if you can figure out what the cause is.
On the face and torso, walking down the extremities. From there, it takes its ordinary, modified, malignant, or hemorrhagic forms. Death rates, depending on the form.
Modified, what was that?
Extremities. From there, it takes its ordinary, modified, malignant, or hemorrhagic form.
Ordinary, they didn't show it. Malignant, what was that? I can't remember that last word. I can't remember 3 words in a row.
It's ordinary, modified, malignant, or hemorrhagic forms.
Hemorrhagic.
Death rates, depending on the form,
That's Ebola.
From 30 to over 90%. This is smallpox, a disease that appeared in the ancient texts of India and has been found in Egyptian pharaohs, a virus that ravaged ancient Rome and toppled the indigenous societies of the Americas. A plague so deadly, humans have dedicated several gods to the disease, and it's one of only 2 diseases humans have ever eradicated.
Yes, they did.
This episode is brought to you by the Child and Teen Checkups Program of Minnesota. As a parent, you worry about your child, so you should visit your nearest clinic for a wellness check, free for infants through your adults.
Is my child healthy? Does he look healthy? Is he saying he's got anything wrong with him? Then he's healthy. Why do you need to go and have loads of stuff stuck in his ear and up his bum to see if he's healthy? If he's healthy, he's healthy.
Be happy knowing your child is healthy. Learn more at the links below. It's difficult to overestimate the impact of smallpox on human history. From killing monarchs to paving the way for colonialism in the Americas, the Pacific Islands, and Australia, it was a disease. 400,000 people died from it every year, and most people got it during their lifetimes. Its high mortality rate for children, at times 80%, was a major factor in lowering lifespan.
80%?
The view from orbit, because
80% of children got smallpox. What? Well, that's what they're saying. And they're saying that, most people who lived to adulthood had received smallpox in their life and survived, although they keep saying that they were severely pockmarked for the rest of their life.
Dual level. This disease was even worse. Those infected needed constant care, meaning it easily passed to caregivers, wiping out whole families. And survivors experienced permanent effects, from deep-pitted facial scars to the loss of eyelashes to blindness. This was so common that ladies' etiquette books advised on how to properly console a friend whose beauty had been ravaged by the disease. The only guard against smallpox was a process called variolation, where a doctor would cut open the pustule of an infected patient, dry the extracted material, then rub it into a cut on the arm of a healthy patient. This procedure was brought to England in 1718 by Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, who witnessed the procedure in the Ottoman Empire, where her husband was serving as the British ambassador. While Europeans had heard of the practice, Lady Mary became an advocate for bringing the procedure to England, having both her own children variolated, and got permission to test it successfully on 6 prisoners at Newgate. By 1722, members of the royal family were being variolated. Now, variolation was not vaccination. It was giving someone a weakened version of full-blown smallpox, but it was better than nothing. In experiments at the time, about 2% of people died from the procedure versus the 14% of natural infections. But the infected person also became contagious, putting friends and family at risk and requiring a period of quarantine. In other words, it was both extremely expensive and only available to the rich, who could afford professional care and to stop working. One of those variolated was a teenage boy named Edward Jenner, and the procedure was the talk of the school. Everyone had an opinion, even the milkmaid, who said she didn't need it. Yeah, because you see, she'd already had cowpox, she said, and people who get cowpox never get smallpox. It was a statement that stuck.
So the answer came from a milkmaid. They already knew. Right? Milk a cow, as most people did.
With Jenner for decades, as he finished school, as he apprenticed under the great surgeon John Hunter, as he returned home to become a county doctor, and while fooling around with hot air balloons and zoological pursuits. Eventually, this offhand comment would lead him to develop something that would save more lives than any other discovery in history. In 1796, a milkmaid named Sarah Nelmis came to him, exhibiting signs of cowpox. Remembering the mention from his youth, he asked the young woman whether she'd ever had smallpox. She hadn't, having studied both animals and people. Jenner knew diseases could pass between them, but cowpox was a mild disease, causing mere lesions on hands and arms, and also not very infectious person to person. Was it possible that an infection with the mild cowpox could provide immunity from smallpox? He decided to test it on James Phillips, the son of his gardener, who was 8 years old. Now, that could be seen as wildly unethical today, but in Jenner's defense, part of it was likely practical. Smallpox was so endemic that children were the only people who hadn't had it at one time or another. And if he were right, this would be one child who would never have to face its horrors. We assume he had his father's permission, but it is worth mentioning that we don't know Philip's part of the story.
If his milkmaid was
he gave
right.
Philip cowpox, then tried to variolate him with smallpox. No symptoms. The kid was immune. But not only that, he discovered that cowpox could be transmitted person to person, making vaccination much easier. And that was the term he created, vaccination, from his new Latin name for cowpox, which means smallpox of the cow.
Right, and do you think that all the big leaders, the elites, the Jesuits, they're not going to be looking at this type of thing and thinking, can we use any of this to our advantage?
Now, he conducted 23 more experimental vaccinations, including on his infant son, and submitted a paper to the Royal Society. Now, Jenner was not the first to vaccinate with cowpox. It had been believed Jenner's work.
Spent all his life doing this,
results, sometimes
became poor, but then got given a shed load of money, and then died.
Granted him £10,000 for his work.
Influenced history that we can't even imagine. Now, as we in the past, influenced history that we can't even imagine.
Now, as we stand on the brink of total eradication of this once powerful plague, the danger is back and deadlier than ever.
So many use it as a biological weapon. God help us if they do.
There wasn't a country in the world that had not been touched and devastated by smallpox. But in the most massive undertaking ever to rid humanity of the disease, smallpox was conquered. It took a 12-year campaign to vaccinate the world.
What we're beginning to see here, that word disease, you might as well not talk about eradicating a single disease. You should talk about eradicating disease. And let's face it, that ain't going to happen. It began when we started doing agriculture and grouping together. So unless you want to just separate everyone and we don't mix together and all that, you're never going to eradicate disease. Disease comes for a reason. It's not for the whole population. It's not a bad thing. It's keeping us fit. It's keeping our future generations healthy so that we don't have to suffer. The more we fight against it, the more we're going to suffer. Got it?
Officially, only a few vials of the live virus remain, and there is a raging debate about what to do with them. Join us for Smallpox.
He wants to shove it up his bottom.
Atlanta, Georgia. In the middle of this bustling city of 3.5 million people sits an ordinary-looking complex of government buildings, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Behind these closed doors, scientists work in high-security labs with some of the world's deadliest biological agents. Ebola, Anthrax, Marburg. They are all lethal. Only one among them, however, has already massacred millions. Its name is smallpox.
What do they do with them every day? Play with them?
Specimens of the deadly virus, also known as variola, sleep in a nondescript freezer.
People think I'm mad.
Security precautions.
The virus is frozen in liquid nitrogen, and not many people even know exactly where physically the rooms are where the virus is.
They've lost them.
Viruses are among the smallest of all life forms. These single-celled parasites invade a host cell and hijack its DNA.
By the way, virus technology is on the verge of a massive discovery, as I did hear on a BBC program. There's this woman working with viruses, and they've looked where viruses are in nature, and they're basically in the seawater. There are millions per, take a teaspoon of seawater and you'll have millions of viruses in there. Now, a lot of them, if not most of them, are actually good and are going to probably being used for the future in helping with things. And if you've got a sore throat, man, you could go and gargle seawater and it'll probably sort it out.
DNA in order to replicate themselves. Among all known viruses, smallpox is the largest, containing the most complex DNA sequence. It is also one of the smartest.
It was designed for one thing, which is to kill. It generally enters through the nose and attacks the cells in the lungs. The virus expands in the cell, and the next cell over, which touches the first cell, will catch it, and it goes on from there. In a matter of hours, it can spread all over the body. It's one of the fastest and most efficient killers of them all.
Unlocking the mysteries of how viruses operate are modern discoveries, but smallpox is an ancient menace. This microscopic life form has been terrorizing mankind since the beginning of civilization. No one knows when smallpox makes its first appearance on the stage of human history. Most likely it begins as an animal virus somewhere in Africa, the Middle East, or the Asian subcontinent. At some point, the virus makes the jump to the human population.
We estimate we'd have to have hundreds of thousands of people before it could keep going. So we assumed the spread to the human population did not occur until after the first agricultural settlements, maybe 10,000 years ago.
Yeah, well, they didn't have it in South America.
The virus follows the population as it migrates. It spreads slowly throughout burgeoning human communities. The first tangible evidence of its deadly nature is found in the ruins of ancient Egypt. In 1898, an archaeologist uncovers the mummy of Pharaoh Ramses V, believed to have died around 1157 BC.
That mummy has a rash, the distribution of which and the size of the pustules match almost exactly that of smallpox in more recent times. And so we think that is the first concrete evidence of the smallpox virus in humans.
Vague descriptions of the virus appear in some early chronicles. In 430 BC, Greek historian Thucydides writes of a lethal pox-like illness that decimates the great city-state of Athens, causing the end of the Peloponnesian War. 165 AD.
And they were starving, weren't they? Because the Spartans had laid siege to their city, and they weren't getting any food. They weren't able to get much fresh water and stuff like that. And then disease wrapped upon them. So they were weakened.
Centurions returning from Mesopotamia carry another pox-like illness to their capital city. The plague of Antonius rages for 15 years and kills an estimated 3.5 to 7 million people. The first full written record of a smallpox case is provided by a 9th century Persian physician, Rhazes. He describes a gruesome pathology that begins with a rash covering the body, then later breaks out into tiny pus-filled pox. Blindness may result if the eyes are affected. If the patient is lucky, he
they might be dead.
This virus killed people by destroying internal systems.
Ah.
We could see what it was doing to the outside of the body, the skin.
Don't want that.
The same thing was happening to the intestines, to the linings of the lungs, and those kind of vital organs.
Sorry, I interrupted him. We should listen to that.
What it was doing to the outside of the body, the skin. But in fact, the same thing was happening to the intestines, to the linings of the lungs, and those kind of vital organs. So you have the linings sloughing off, and people simply drowning, for example, in their own internal fluids.
Early treatments for the virus variola, Latin for speckled, are varied and uniformly uncomfortable. The physician Razis recommends that victims should be bled to the point of fainting. Other therapies include opening the sores on the
Did it work though? That's what I'd like to know. I know it sounds awful and I wouldn't want to be bled to the point of fainting, but did it work? And if it did, couldn't you then learn something from that? All right, something like, thinning the blood? Maybe thinning the blood would work? Can we try that, please?
day with a golden needle or drinking a potion of horse dung.
I like the sound of that.
The most torturous treatment involves the application of heat, even though smallpox involves a high fever.
They put you next to a fire and you close all the windows. So you take a person who is definitely ill.
Did it work? Did it fucking work, mate? He didn't say, right? Get that fever up, okay? You don't want it more than 105 or something, but get it up. Kill the virus.
It made it feel much worse.
Feel worse if it solves the problem.
Somehow became
But
associated with the color red. So that smallpox victims were put in rooms that were painted entirely red. They had red draperies. They were made to wear red pajamas.
Now, I always think, they just dismiss. They go, because of this and because it was hot, they associated the color red with something hot. So they put them in a red room. Blah, blah. Did it work? Is there something about it? We're told these days, like we look at blue light and that makes us awake and stuff, There's something to do with the red light and drinking red things have certain ingredients in them that make them red. Did it work? If it did, that's something you can use.
Wrapped in red blankets, they sometimes were made to drink red juices, all with the understanding that this color red would draw the infection out more rapidly. It's hard to know, but a certain percentage, probably a substantial percentage, of smallpox patients died because of the doctors, not because of the...
Yeah, well, that still happens today, so shut up.
Open up between Europe and Asia. Merchants travel the Silk Road to China, unaware that they are also exporting the mortal ailment. Crusaders returning from West Asia in the 12th and 13th centuries carried the disease back home to their families, ignorant of the fact that even those not afflicted with full symptoms are spreading the virus.
As soon as people came to begin feeling ill, with headache, backache, those kinds of symptoms, they were already breathing out virus onto others.
Other killer diseases, such as bubonic plague or yellow fever, sweep through populations periodically. But by the 15th century, smallpox is endemic in much of the Old World, continually spreading throughout the population. Most people who reach adulthood have already survived the infection.
In fact, most of the paintings you see of the great beauties at the time, the painters were faking it. Because these people, particularly the women.
How does he know that? These fucking assumptions they're always making. So we're supposed to believe now that for hundreds of years, everyone was goddamn ugly with massive pit holes all over their faces. Like, then they're making out like it's bloody everyone. It wouldn't have been everyone. Come on.
Had truly awful complexions. But people just saw through it. They simply ignored the pox because everybody had it.
See? Is it everybody had it?
October 1562. The 29-year-old Protestant Queen of England, Elizabeth I, catches a chill while walking in the gardens of Hampton.
Well, she might have had it.
A German physician diagnoses her ailment as smallpox, sending the queen into a rage.
Have the knave away, out of my sight.
The queen's anger cannot prevent the inevitable. A telltale rash soon appears with its accompanying high fever. England is in turmoil. If Elizabeth dies without an heir, Mary, Queen of Scots, may seize the throne, bringing Catholics back into power.
Queen Elizabeth was wrapped in crimson cloth, put near a fire. They closed all of her nose and they made her as possible. Despite the best efforts of her physicians, she survived. There are many historians who think that she lost most of her hair. One of the reasons why she wore a red wig for the rest of her life. And they're not quite sure what it did to her complexion, but quite likely it was a mess. It was one of the reasons she wore very, very thick makeup.
In the years
maybe.
The young queen squelches the Catholic threat and ultimately executes her cousin Mary. Elizabeth's reign lasts 45 years, becoming one of the most dynamic eras of the British Empire.
Shakespeare, he was there.
One of the great
Francis Drake,
he was there. If she had died in her 20s, as she was then, certainly English and probably world history would have been very different.
Other English monarchs are not so fortunate when smallpox strikes their thrones.
I don't want to watch all this.
130 years later,
I didn't know.
William III and Mary II rule as co-sovereigns.
Yeah.
William is known to have entertained
William gets it.
when his wife becomes ill.
Oh no, she gets it. And then he sleeps with someone else. So, bye! Right. Anyone still here? Hello. Go until 11:15. Yeah, let's talk about the polio.
It wouldn't cause a problem. Now, that's the case in, say, 90% of instances. It just goes through the gut.
Problem.
You don't actually notice anything at all. Only the unlucky few percent, really 1 to 5% of people in whom the virus honed in on the spinal cord. And in the right there, you see a section through the spinal cord, and that great white hole is the anterior horn of the grey matter. And the significance of that is that this is where the great big nerve cells live that drive the muscles. So if you've got a hole in your spinal cord where those nerve cells live because they've been destroyed, then the muscles innervated by that segment of the spinal cord will no longer work. And the upshot of that is the characteristic clinical picture of polio. It used to be called infantile paralysis because it seemed to pick on children. It did affect adults as well, but certainly the initial descriptions were clusters, small sporadic outbreaks in particularly in children.
Because it was a summer virus, so the virus was around in the summer, and in America, he's not showing it on this one, but even in America, you know, not that long ago, every summer they would be risking against this polio thing, and it would be babies if they got it, you know, and how would the parents know if they got it? Oh, you know, and then it would have those sort of crippling effects. Right, that was quite good. We saw that, didn't we? And we saw that. Enough of that. So then, back to me, I think. Oh no, while you're facing this way, oh, no one's here anyway. Anyone who watches later, I'm going to show you what I'm working on. I'm making slow progress, but I am making some. So this is talking about the 19-year wave. And times and up the game. And so I've done that video. I've done 1330 to 1444, and this is the one I'm working on now. So I've still got 4 of them to do, but I've done 2 of them, and you know, marked all the stuff on the map there. And to be honest, these 2 aren't. They are sort of in line with what I've been saying, but not quite so obvious, which is probably why I'm a bit slow working on them, to be honest. So anyway, we're getting there, getting there. Right. back to me. Oh, you're back. One day somebody is gonna say hello. Aren't they? One day. So we've got about 20 minutes left here. Should we just have a little here to see what is on? Oh, what have I done? LBC. Let's listen to LBC.
Which seemed to be a complete overreaction.
We've never had multiple towns in a Western liberal democracy being locked down because of inoperable people.
Exactly, and I just think that maybe that's an overreaction, but it's only a point of view. I'm just basing I'm basing this on the real figures that we're seeing in Wuhan.
You're right to be cautious.
Is
well, Chris, I get it.
Down the line.
The statistical points that you raise are valid.
And if we don't go on too long with these shutting down of places, if it's only for a couple of months or whatever, this
one took me an hour to get through, which is understandable. But because I haven't actually been to the countries themselves, they said I'm clear and I can go to my GP. So I ring my GP and I explain the whole situation about hub airports, which they understood, thank goodness, what a hub airport was. And I had a telephone appointment with my GP. And that now they've asked me to put it in writing to 111 so I can try and get a coronavirus test. But
so you've got to write to 111.
I've got to write. There's apparently a form online that I've been trying to find, but I can't.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I've put myself in self-isolation because I don't want to run the risk. But these hub airports, the issue hasn't been addressed yet, I don't think.
And you felt unwell? So you have had the cough and the high temperature and the shortness of breath?
Yeah.
And when did you last fly back from Dubai?
I came back on Tuesday.
Right. I have to say, Justina, you don't sound brilliant. I mean, you sound a bit unwell.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
That would be it. Yep.
Cough it up, woman. Cough it up.
It's very hard, so I've now
Have
put
a
myself
fag.
in self-isolation.
She's dying on the
I
radio.
find out if I can get a test or if I'm over sort of being a drama queen or anything.
And how long have they said that this process of writing to 111 might take?
They've no idea because they didn't know anyone else that had done it.
Wow. That feels like it's another layer of bureaucracy for you.
Just putting people off.
Time.
When they tell you to write to them, they basically just might as well say, look, we're not interested,
People
fuck
don't
off.
fly direct. If they can get a cheaper flight,
yeah,
they will go through these international hub airports.
Well, Justine, I can't really offer you any advice because I don't know what there haven't been published any advice yet about what to do if you've been through a hub airport. But it seems like, as you've found out and having looked at it online yourself, if you've got a cough and a high temperature and a shortness of breath, and you're worried about those you've been in contact with flying around the world, then perhaps you're taking the right decision. But it's
party's candidate to take on Donald Trump for the White House later this year. It follows disappointing results on Tuesday when 14 states voted for their preferred choice.
Well, I've lost. That one's probably a bit heavy to start with. Start with this one. I could do with practicing this one. So you can hear my laptop working in there. Everything's hot. Hot. Hot, baby, hot. I wasn't nobody does it quite the way you do. Just keep it coming. How'd you learn to do? It's alright for you and me to say what's wrong and what's right. That's wrong, isn't it? And you just go tweak them up, and then you're set. Then you're set. Oh, that was too high. I'm gonna have to sort that later. Get them when I think there's them. You're looking for chords online. Add AZ on the end, and that is the best website. Sometimes I don't put the chords quite in the right place, and sometimes look you in the eye, just like an angel. Your skin makes me cry, flow like a feather. Beautiful world. Wish I was special. You're so fucking special. But I'm a creep. I'm a widow. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. Don't care if it hurts. I wanna have control. I want a perfect body. I want a perfect soul. I want you to notice that I'm not around. So fucking special. I wish I was special, but I'm a creep. I'm a widow. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. Oh, she's running out again. I can't do this. She's running out. She runs. Right, ciao, bye. I've done it. I've finished. I don't know, next week maybe? What do you think? Let me know. For love.